Hey guys, my name is Giselle and this is my channel Dizzy Doggo, where I authentically and awkwardly share my life with you. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know that I'm an art student, and hopefully you also know that I'm Dominican. So I've been taking some Latin American art history classes in school, and recently we went to the Radical Woman show at the Brooklyn Museum. And it's not a perfect show, but it's definitely powerful to see so many works by Latina artists all in one space. So it's inspired me to start a series where I feature different Latina artists. Before I start, I just want to say sorry if you can hear the birds chirping and there's any weird noises coming from outside. But this is where I could get the best lighting. So to start off the series, I wanted to talk about an artist who I have loved for a very long time, and I actually mentioned in my March favorites video, so check that out if you want to know more about me. And her name is Mendieta. She is a Cuban artist who lived from 1948 to 1985. She was born in Havana, Cuba, and she came to the US under Operation Peter Pan, where the United States helped basically smuggle in a bunch of children as refugees under the Castro administration in Cuba, and basically help them escape from the conditions there. So she came with her older sister, and I think she was 12 years old when she came here. And first she came to Miami, and then she ended up in Iowa. So while she was in the University of Iowa, she started off as a painter. I've actually never been able to find any of those early paintings that are spoken about while she was in school, but she quickly moved on to performance art, and she talks about how she felt like painting wasn't enough. She says, "The turning point in my art was in 1972, when I realized that my paintings were not real enough for what I want the image to convey. And by real, I mean I want my images to have power, to be magic." So it's pretty straightforward. One of her pieces that I love is called Facial Hair Transplants, and basically her classmate would trim pieces of his beard and she would attach them onto her face as her own beard, kind of. And so she's talking about the fluidity of identity, and I kid you not, when I saw this image at the show, I shed a tear because her eye contact is just so powerful and so emotive, and it was just so powerful to be confronted with face to face with this person who I've admired for so long. So after college, her performances mostly shifted to body art and land art. She was part of these movements, and she is very famous for her series called Siluetas, which translates to silhouettes. And basically she would either leave her trace in the land in some way, in the form of a silhouette of her body, or she would put her own body physically into a space. And a quote by her, she's talking about this image called Image from Yagul, and she says, "In 1973, I did my first piece in an Aztec tomb that was covered in weeds and grasses. That growth reminded me of time. I bought flowers at the market, lay on the tomb, and was covered with white flowers. The analogy was that I was covered by time and history." I just think it's really beautiful how she relates land as a symbol of history. She also talks about the idea of ritual, which I think is something that's beautiful and something that I've been interested in my own work, and just how the ritual can be a means of connecting the physical with the spiritual. She did a lot of films, and she actually produced over 100 films, which is really cool, just because at the time, film was something that was so new, and it's really cool that she was one of the pioneers of this. And there's a lot of pieces that I would love to include, but I kind of just decided not to because they can be kind of triggering, but she talks a lot about violence against women or just violence in general, but she uses blood a lot in her work, and I would argue that most often she isn't talking about violence when she uses blood. I think she's talking more about ritual and alluding to Afro-Caribbean religions, referring to Christianity, and just referring to blood as a life force, especially as a woman, you know? So yeah, this piece, Blood and Feathers, number 2, she basically emerges from the water, covers herself in blood, in animal blood, and then covers herself in chicken feathers, and that's the whole thing. And it seems really weird, but I think it's a beautiful way to refer to time and history again, and these traditions. So another way that she refers to history, and when I say when she refers to history, I'm not only talking about the past, I'm also talking about the future and just the continuity of time. And I feel like she was very aware of the continuity of time and space. And so when she makes references to, for example, Taino imagery, which is the people native to Hispaniola, which is the island shared by Dominican Republic and Haiti, and also Puerto Rico, Cuba, other Caribbean islands, she is connecting herself not only with the heritage, but also the knowledge that, like, in the future, we will continue to encounter these images, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is later on in her career, and she starts to move away from performance art, and she makes more sculptural art, and she does these huge formations in the sand. She also had a series called Esculturas Rupestres, which means basically rock sculptures, and she would carve into caves, and I think these were actually in Cuba, so she's kind of, again, implanting herself into this continuum. So one of her last works was called the Totem Grove series, and she made these totem poles with tree trunks, and she would put these very ominous and spiritual figures onto these things. Sadly, her entrance into the world of galleries was cut short because she married the famous minimalist artist Carl Andre in 1984 or 85, and during a domestic dispute in their apartment in New York City, she tragically fell out of a window, and there was a whole long case about whether or not Carl had pushed her out the window or whether it was a suicide. It ended up being ruled as a suicide, but to this day there are protests. Carl Andre is still a very successful artist, but every time he has a retrospective or any kind of show, groups of protesters will show up. They've even dumped blood in front of gallery spaces, and it's encouraging, I guess, that it was happening, because sadly the art world came around Carl Andre and covered things up and defended him. The worst part about it was that he used her work as evidence that she was troubled, and that she was suicidal. And it's honestly really upsetting to me as an artist myself that her work, which, as I mentioned before, I believe is not even really about death, is not really about violence, that her work would be misconstrued in such a way and would be utilized against her. So it's very tragic, but I feel like her work is so powerful that it continues to accomplish what I think she was trying to accomplish, which is to leave her trace, and when she's doing these silhouettes and she's putting herself into the land, I think it's kind of her way of making her mark, and even though a lot of her works were temporary, I feel like her influence has lived on, and her older sister now manages her estate, and her name is Raquelin. She said in an interview recently, when she was talking about after her sister's death, she said, "I had to read all the letters and notebooks and sketchbooks. It was a very healing experience. It continues to be. I feel like I'm still in touch with her. I still have her in my life. Her physical form is gone, but her essence is still here. It's still with me." And so I hope that this video can contribute to be a part of keeping her legacy alive and to educate people about her work, which I feel is so underrated in terms of feminist art, in terms of performance art, and in terms of just the span of art history in general. Thanks for watching. I hope to continue this series, and I will definitely be working to incorporate more Afro-Latina artists, more indigenous artists, and just give more visibility and allow hopefully other Latina artists to find figures that they can connect with. Love you guys. Bye.